Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to welcome you to Spotlight on the NGV Collection, an online event series designed exclusively for NGV Foundation members, Felton Society members, as well as supporters and friends of the NGV. Through this series, we will explore unique aspects of the NGV collection, highlighting little-known areas and exploring stories behind familiar favourites. My name is Misha Agzarian and I am the Assistant Director of Fundraising and Events here at the NGV. I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people as the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and to Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here with us today. Before we get started, we have some quick housekeeping notes for everyone joining us. We want you to feel involved in today's session, so if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat function to the right of the video. A member of the NGV team will be live and responding to your questions this afternoon. To post a question, all you need to do is sign into a Gmail or Google account. Just click on the sign in link in the upper right-hand corner of the page and follow the prompts. So, thank you again for joining us for this online discussion, exclusively for NGV supporters. This afternoon, I am pleased to welcome you to this online event for a fascinating look at the gallery's French porcelain collection displayed here on Level 2 of NGV International. I am delighted to welcome Senior Curator of International Decorative Arts and Antiquities, Amanda Dunsmore, who will lead us through today's talk. Amanda, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Misha. Today I'm going to look at some important examples of our French porcelain collection, including a couple of very exciting new acquisitions that have recently entered the collection. I'd like to start with this exquisite pair of vases of the mid-18th century by the Vincennes Porcelain Factory. These vases were generously supported by Joan Darling through the NGVWA, who celebrated their 60th anniversary last year in 2021, 60 years of outstanding support for the NGV collection. These vases were made by the Vincennes Porcelain Factory, the predecessor to the great Manufacture Royale de Sèvres, France's leading 18th century royal porcelain manufactory, which I'll come to talk about a little later. The Vincennes factory was established in 1740 at the Château de Vincennes, southeast of Paris, with the aim of rivaling the highly fashionable imported porcelain productions of China and Japan and the Meissen factory in Germany. This was a time when owning a porcelain factory was a symbol of great prestige and prompted considerable competition amongst the aristocracy. Within a year, the small experimental factory had established the financial backing of the Comte de Fulvie, the half-brother of Comte de Vignory, who was the general controller of finance to Louis XV, King of France. Such royal connections gave the fledgling factory significant artistic and political advantages. Within 5 years, the factory had been granted a royal monopoly on porcelain production, and in 1753, Louis XV acquired a quarter of the factory's shares. By 1759, the king had assumed complete ownership of the factory, by which stage it had moved to a larger site at Sèvres and was known as the Manufacture Royale de Sèvres. Within a couple of years of its establishment, the Vincennes factory had mastered the production of a particularly white porcelain paste that was purer than any of its competitors. The soft, glassy transparency of the Vincennes porcelain body was one of the early features that contributed to the great success of the factory. And I think this is really a point worth noting. We take porcelain for granted these days, but at this time in the mid-18th century, many factories were really experimenting and it was difficult for them to produce a consistent white porcelain body, and this was something that the Vincennes factory really managed to master and achieved very successfully and very consistently. The factory also developed a broad range of enamel colours that facilitated a sophisticated approach to decoration, as well as mastering the challenging technique of gilding on porcelain. Nevertheless, despite all of these achievements, it was the range of rich, glowing ground colours that the Vincennes factory introduced, like the wonderful blue colour on these vases, and which were later developed at Sèvres, that became a defining feature of the factory. These all-enveloping colours were punctuated with reserves of white porcelain with painted decoration and highlighted with exquisite gilt detailing. The results of the factory were those of supreme elegance and sophistication that came to symbolise France's preeminent position in the 18th century as the leader of luxury taste and design. These ornamental vases in the NGV collection were referred to as vases à oreilles, or vases with ears, in reference to the way that the handles extend organically out of the rim. Each of the models by the factory were given specific names. This particular form is attributed to the factory's designer Jean-Claude Duplessis, and it is thought to have been an entirely original creation, as there are no precedents known in Chinese porcelain or metalware to date. The scrolling, foliate form of the vases reflects the prevailing Rococo taste of artists and designers in mid-18th century France. This model was produced in 6 sizes, with 5 of them known. The first size was the largest, and this pair of vases in the gallery's collection is the 3rd size, which we know was introduced in 1754. These vases were mainly sold in pairs, or as parts of a garniture, a set of vases, normally 3 or more, with a different sized vase in the middle. There are 2 drawings of this model that exist in the factory's archive, as well as an original plaster model, which is quite something that these exist. The blue ground colour on the vases was known as bleu céleste, or celestial blue, and was introduced by the factory in 1753. It quickly became one of the factory's most sought after and expensive ground colours, having initially been used on a dinner service that was produced for King Louis XV. The next work I'd like to look at is this wonderful sculpture of a dog, also by the Vincennes porcelain factory and dating to 1753. It was purchased by the Art Foundation of Victoria with the assistance of the Wyn Morris collection. It's a figure of a long-haired lapdog, possibly a spaniel, a type of small dog beloved by European royalty and aristocracy, in particular women, during the 18th century. And we see this illustrated in François Boucher's painting The Mysterious Basket of 1748, as well as the gallery's 1757 portrait of Countess Anastasia Ivanovna, Countess of Hesse-Homburg, Princess Trubetskaya by Alexander Roslin, where we see the small black dog jumping up on her footstool. It's likely that porcelain models of dogs were being produced at Vincennes by 1750, just 10 years after the factory was established, which is really early. The factory's general inventory of October 1752 indicates that 263 dogs were in stock from a whole series of models available in the factory sale room. The inventory makes mention of specific breeds just twice: Mastiffs, which were available in 3 sizes, and Water Spaniels. The others were described simply as either small dogs, or 5 dogs of Madame de Belfond, which is presumably referring to the owner of a dog of that type, rather than the actual breed. The dogs ranged in price from 20 sols for a small dog in the white, through to 10 livres for one of the larger models. Unfortunately though, it's impossible today to match the porcelain models that we know, like the NGV's dog, with the general descriptions in the inventory. However, there has long been speculation that the Vincennes factory produced models of some of Madame de Pompadour's favourite dogs. Madame de Pompadour, of course, being the mistress to Louis XV. And such an identity has actually been attributed to the NGV's dog. It shows distinct similarities to a terracotta study of a spaniel, which is dated 1752, and has been suggested that this terracotta might actually represent Madame de Pompadour's dog, Pau. Although an exact identification of the NGV's dog remains elusive, the close relationship of Madame de Pompadour with the Vincennes factory makes the likelihood of the manufacture of porcelain sculptures of her favourite pets extremely plausible. The gallery's dog is almost life-size, and this is a point worth appreciating, as a sculpture of this size would have been a significant challenge for the factory to fire successfully, given that it had only been in operation for 10 years by the time the factory was producing models of dogs. The technical challenges would have been considerable, and the large firing crack in the plinth between the front legs that we see here is testament to these challenges. Undoubtedly, there would have been many failures behind the number of few successful works that we know of. Only a very small number of examples of the gallery's dog are known. One is in the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge, but this example is decorated in coloured enamels, Interestingly, although clearly intended to enhance the verisimilitude of the figure, the addition of colours actually obscures the fine modelling of surface detail and hand finishing, which is highlighted so beautifully in the unadorned white porcelain body of the NGV's dog. Two other examples in white are also known, but they both differ slightly in design. Thus, the NGV's dog is an extremely rare survival of a class of sculpture by the Vincennes manufactory, and one that continues to intrigue us with its tantalising links to Madame de Pompadour and the French royal court of the mid-18th century. Staying in the 18th century, I'd like to now look at a work by the Sèvres manufactory, the successor to the Vincennes factory, when it moved to the site of Sèvres in 1756, and where it remains today. The work is in this case of French white porcelain, and it's a figure group known as La Lanterne Magique, or the Magic Lantern, and it was modelled in 1757 by the factory's chief modeller, Etienne Maurice Falconet. The work was generously supported by Peter and Ivanka Canet. It's made in biscuit or unglazed porcelain and depicts three children around a magic lantern or an early image projector. We can see the boy who acts as a showman standing on one side of the peep show, while a girl holding a basket of bread leans forward to look into it, while the other little boy peers over her shoulders from the side. As I said, the group was first modelled in 1757, along with a companion piece entitled Le Tourniquet, or the Turnstile. And both subjects are actually based loosely on an engraving by Charles-Nicolas Cochin, Foire de Campagne, the country fair, which is after a now lost tapestry design by François Boucher, La Foire de Village, the village fair. Examples of figure groups from this series of children playing at a fair were first sold to Louis XV and Madame de Pompadour, but others are also known to have belonged to Empress Maria Theresa of Austria. By the time the Sèvres manufactory was established, the factory developed a refined ceramic body with a milky white translucency that was suitable for both figures and tablewares. The early style of Vincennes porcelain was heavily indebted to Meissen, both in object design and decoration. But around 1750, the factory began to break from the influences of Meissen and significantly diversified in its models. During the 1750s, a new group of talented artists brought about a complete shift in style from Saxon or Meissen porcelain and Asian-inspired pieces to entirely original French productions like we saw in the dog. The support and protection of the king and his mistress, Madame de Pompadour, enabled the Sèvres manufactory to secure the best artists, sculptors, designers and chemists at the time. Etienne Maurice Falconet was one of the leading French sculptors of the mid-18th century, and in 1757, under the patronage of Madame de Pompadour, he was appointed Director of Sculpture at the factory, where he remained until 1766. During this period, Falconet either executed or supervised the making of around 100 models for statuettes or groups, including original creations as well as works made from designs by François Boucher. Porcelain figure groups, like the Magic Lantern, evolved as table decorations for the dessert table to replace those that were made of sugar or wax. Elaborate table ornaments were an important part of grand dining in the 18th century, and figures were designed to be seen from all sides. Pastoral groups, playful children, and allegorical or mythological themes were some of the most popular subjects illustrated in porcelain sculpture. White, unglazed biscuit porcelain was launched at the Vincennes manufactory in 1751 and proved an ideal substitute for sugar sculpture, having a fine crystalline look to its surface. It soon replaced the production of glazed figures at Sèvres. Biscuit porcelain was as highly prized as that of marble or bronze. Faults and blemishes could not be concealed by glaze or painted decoration, and it was thus extremely expensive to produce. A final point to make here is the underlying reference to classical antiquity in the factory's biscuit porcelain sculptures. They are illustrative of the 18th century taste for classical sculpture in white marble and the misunderstanding that ancient Greek and Roman sculpture was actually white. In fact, they were not. Research now revealing that ancient sculptures and indeed buildings were highly painted in a range of bright, gaudy colours. Over the years, many scholars have refused to believe this. The sculptor Auguste Rodin is understood to have actually beat his chest in sorrow, exclaiming, "I feel it here that they were never coloured." But in fact, they were. Following along in this grand tradition of biscuit porcelain, the final work I'd like to look at today is an exciting new acquisition of a group of 11 figures by the Sèvres manufactory from the series called Le Jeu de l'Écharpe, or the Scarf Dance. These works are an exceptional gift by Christina Campbell-Pretty AM and her family. The Scarf Dance series dates to 1900 and has become one of the most iconic expressions of the Art Nouveau style. It comprises 15 figures of women dressed in flowing garments and dancing with scarves and musical instruments. The central figure of the horn player on the pedestal directs the dance, and the figures are framed by a pair of statuesque torchbearers, also on pedestals, who oversee the dance. The figures embody the principles of organic form and movement, and the representation of the now liberated female form in their reform dresses. The series was initially created in terracotta, in fact, in 1897 by the sculptor Agathon Leonard, as part of a decorative concept for the foyer of a dance hall, appropriately. Alexandre Sondier, the artistic director at Sèvres, viewed the figures at the Salon de la Société Nationale des Beaux-Arts and commissioned their production by Sèvres in biscuit porcelain. Their production represented the first works in the Art Nouveau style for the manufactory, quite a revolutionary moment. The series was exhibited for the first time as a table centerpiece in the Sèvres Pavilion at the Paris International Exhibition in 1900. It was considered a masterpiece of the exhibition, with the factory awarded a Grand Prix medal. Due to its success, the French state offered this first production as a diplomatic gift to Tsar Nicholas II and his wife Alexandra Fedorovna, Emperor and Empress of Russia. The series is now in the Hermitage Museum, St. Petersburg, and is one of the few complete sets in existence. Today, complete sets are known to exist in the French Embassy in Prague, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, the Museum for Arts and Crafts in Hamburg, and the Musée National de Céramique at Sèvres in France. Following the exhibition, the series was put into production in 2 different sizes. The original size, or première grandeur, the first size, was 57 centimetres high, which is the gallery's suite. And then there was a smaller size, the deuxième grandeur, or second size, which was produced at 38 centimetres high. Between 1901 and 1923, 59 examples of each size were executed, and collectors had the choice of acquiring either the complete series or individual figures. And the pedestals were also sold separately at the manufactory. The concept for the scarf dance was most likely inspired by the performances of the American dancer and choreographer Loie Fuller, one of the most celebrated dancers in Paris during the late 1890s and early 1900s. Fuller became famous for her performances dressed in swathes of diaphanous silk that she swirled with battens, entrancing audiences through her innovative use of mirrors and coloured glass slides, which were projected onto her robes to create colourful, ethereal effects. Fuller became so celebrated that she was actually given her own theatre at the Paris International Exhibition in 1900. She epitomised the exotic, sensuous woman that came to embody the Art Nouveau style, which came to its height at the 1900 exhibition. This gilt bronze lighted sculpture of Loie Fuller in the gallery's collection is from a series of sculptures by the French sculptor François Raoul Larche, and it's currently on display in our exhibition Queer, Stories from the NGV collection on the 3rd floor. The figures from the scarf dance emulate Fuller's beguiling performances, and they are dynamic studies in movement and drapery. While each individual figure has a distinctive character and pose, the whole ensemble possesses a rhythm and harmony that contributes to the unity of the whole. We are thrilled to be able to bring such a significant group of these figures into the NGV collection.
Amanda, thank you for taking us on today's fascinating tour of French porcelain, and we look forward to displaying the scarf dance figurines on level 2 of NGV International towards the end of June 2022. I wish to recognise the long-standing dedication of all supporters, in particular our decorative arts supporters, whose steadfast commitment is truly valued by everyone at the NGV. Thank you. I also wish to thank Sari de Mallory, Erin Whitfield, and all staff behind the scenes who produced this online session. We hope you enjoyed today's talk, and we look forward to seeing you at our next online event to be announced soon, so do stay tuned for further information. In the meantime, have a lovely evening, and from everyone at the NGV, we thank you for your support towards the gallery.